Welcome to Brera. We're here in a room with two masterpieces that have never been seen together before. Why? To explain why, I have to go back in time to maybe the 1960s in New York, when there was a dusty, boring old museum called the Metropolitan. And their new director, a young art historian, specialist in the medieval, Thomas Hoving, decided that he wanted to make the mummies dance. So what did Thomas Hoving propose? He decided to create a temporary exhibition because no one was coming to the museum. And he created the first blockbuster exhibitions. In fact, with an exhibition of 16th century Florentine art that had been recovered from the floods of 1966. This was a fabulous idea. People came back to the museum, they looked at the show, they went around. Wonderful. Fast forward 50 years, and we realize that Thomas Hoving created a monster. Blockbuster exhibitions now are the reason you build new museums, are the reason that visitors go to museums. They go to the exhibition. King Tut, Vermeer. They don't go to the museum anymore. The rooms are quiet. There's no one there. They're still dusty. What started as the correct and a wonderful initiative to get people back to the collections actually ended up becoming a parasite. We've decided to do something very different at Brera. Brera has one of the most beautiful collections in Italy, possibly even in the world. It has a collection that includes Mantegna, that includes Veronese, it includes Bellini, it includes Piero Francesca, it includes Caravaggio. This is a collection that is a blockbuster every day of the week. The amount of firepower, of candle power of this collection is unparalleled. So it would be almost an act of lèse-majesté to do a blockbuster exhibition in this museum. Instead, we've decided to fly in the face of fashion and do non-exhibitions. We could even call them inhibitions. We're bringing people back into the collection. And our first inhibition, we've baptized a dialogue, because the spirit is to bring a foreign guest, a very special guest, back to the museum to speak with our masterpieces. This first dialogue is exceptional in many different ways. In 1797, Napoleon, who, if you remember at that point, controlled most of northern Italy, decided to make a present to the museum that at the time was called the Musée Napoléon, which we now know as the Louvre. He decided to make a gift of Perugino's Marriage of the Virgin from the cathedral in Perugia. So he took it proudly back, or he had it sent, obviously he didn't put it on his horse, he had it sent to Paris, where he presented it to the director of the Musée Napoléon, Denon, after whom the entire wing is now named. And to his surprise, Denon said, "No, thank you. We actually, not our style. We are much more interested in the art of our time." So poor old Napoleon had to send it into, well, he didn't, Denon did, Denon sent it into the provinces, sent it into Normandy, to Caen, to the Museum of Caen, where it stayed, and has stayed until only a short time ago. Canova tried in the mid-19th century to bring it back, without any success. So there in Caen sat Perugino's masterpiece, The Marriage of the Virgin. And here, since 1806, is Raphael's masterpiece by the same name, The Marriage of the Virgin. There they are. So after 8 long years of negotiation, the museum managed to convince the collection in Caen, the Municipal Museum of Caen, to lend us the Perugino, which has returned for the first time since 1797. Now, if that's not enough to get people to come back to the museum, There's another thing. Every single textbook of the history of art, you see these two paintings together all the time. They're one of the most famous marriages, if you wish, in the history of art. Every single basic text, 101 history of art, you open it, there's Perugino, Raphaello, Perugino, Raphaello. They've never, ever in the history of humanity been in the same room at the same time, even though they were painted by the master, Perugino, and his very gifted student, his pupil, his follower, Raffaello. They were painted within 1 year of each other. They have never been in the same physical space together until now. This dialogue is as important in the history of art as any blockbuster that I can imagine. Here together for the first time, when they came here, when the painting came out of the box, when it came out of the crate, carefully removed, my restorer was here, our restorer was here, and he said, James, for the first time I can tell you how this was painted. For the first time he could see the differences between the technique of Perugino and the technique of his student. For the first time you could see the beautiful, very calm stability of the Perugino together with the increasing plasticity and fluid movement of the Raphael. You see the different color range, you see a deeper palette, you see much more attention to details, to different parts of the painting, from the master to his student. The structure is almost identical. There is a temple in the background. There are strong perspectives. Of course, you have in the foreground the marriage itself, the exchange of the rings, the ring that was the betrothal. You could call this the betrothal of the Virgin Mary. You see in Perugino the old Joseph, who's very clearly an old man, but he's holding a flowering branch. He's won, according to an apocryphal story, he's won the competition that Mary had for a suitor. And in the background there are frustrated young men breaking their branches, their dry branches. Only Joseph holds this flowering branch. In Raphael's sposalizio, in his marriage, it's not quite as clear about Joseph. Joseph looks much younger. Maybe we're getting used to our movie stars being slightly older, but he looks like a sort of a 40-year-old Brad Pitt. So you have in Raphael a very different portrayal of Joseph, who of course enters history as the husband of the Mother of God. A very interesting fate. So you have here on the one hand Raphael with a vibrancy that fundamentally shows you how contemporary he was. And what happens with contemporary, because of course contemporary doesn't exist. Art is never contemporary, except in one moment, and that's when the artist makes the painting, or the installation, or the piece of video art. Art only is contemporary once. Anselm Kiefer is a contemporary artist. In 100 years, he'll be an old master. His greatest moment of contemporary was when he made his paintings. So today we have contemporary artists. They're contemporary. They live in their world. They smell the same things. They read the same news. They live in our world and they make the art that they make. The same is true with Raphael. The same is true, in fact, with Perugino. What we see is a progression of contemporary. And the goal of this kind of dialogue, and other dialogues we can have, is to once again put the visitor in the position of understanding that contemporary is a fleeting moment in which we are living. These artists were profoundly contemporary. Mantegna, with his new interpretation of the dead Christ lying with his feet pointing out at us on the slab, or Caravaggio with his supper at Emmaus with a new form of lighting. They were as contemporary as anything going. Caravaggio broke all the rules as much as Picasso. Raphael began to define a new visual language. Without Raphael, without Perugino, his master, we could not imagine living our contemporary in the world we live in. So here you have a new way of looking at the museum. The museum is more than just a place to shuffle around listlessly on a rainy Saturday afternoon. This is a place where you re-engage with who you are. It's not a place where we come as just consumers. We're not consuming art. We're not the clients of the museum. this isn't just a product that we offer. This is where we discover, in the most profound way, our own identity as human beings, as citizens, as people who participate in their contemporary. In rediscovering the contemporary in the paintings, we rediscover ourselves as citizens that are more than consumers and more than just voters. We belong to a world in which creativity, innovation, and art carry us forward into the future. So here we bring with us the past to create a present, which of course becomes our future.